What's up, guys? This is the List Bro here, and today we are ranking WWE PG Era Wrestlers. I got my Yes, Yes, Yes shirt ready to go. So I'm very excited to make this list because I grew up when the PG era was happening. I'm very fond of this era, even though it has its haters. I mean, it had its problems too. It wasn't perfect, but there were some pretty cool wrestlers, cool storylines, and stuff. So for this tier list, we are not evaluating the entire career of WWE superstars. It's just going to be like evaluating how they were in the PG era. So let's get started with this. Let me just share my screen here so everyone can see the tier list. All right. So here we are. It goes from S at the top, F on the bottom. So right away, we're starting off with possibly the greatest women's wrestler of this time and of all time, perhaps in the top five, I'd say. AJ Lee. So this is a definite S tier because I mean she had a monumental career and it all pretty much took place in this era, and she has so many memorable not only matches but moments, and her character development was pretty incredible. Now when she first came up from NXT and she was on SmackDown tag teaming with like Caitlyn and Natalia, I didn't really care for her, but to be quite honest, I kind of cared more about uh some of the hotter divas like Kelly and Eve. She just wasn't really my style, but I grew to really appreciate her over time. She's a great in-ring worker. I mean, she was doing shit that a lot of the women's wrestlers at the time weren't doing, or at least weren't allowed to do. She would do freaking like Hurricane Ranas and Bulldogs, and she was just super athletic and knew how to construct a match and had great psychology as well. Her promo ability was great for, a woman wrestler during those times where, again, they weren't given as much freedom. Um, for me personally, the highlight of seeing her career, well, there's really two. Number one is the storyline with her, CM Punk, and Daniel Bryan and Kane. I guess that whole like love triangle. That was some great television, and she really rose to the occasion with her character. And you just wondered every single week what's AJ going to be up to. They kind of blew it with her being the general manager. I think she did her best, but it was a poorly written role at that point. And her feud with Paige was incredible. It lasted the better part of a year, but I love both of them. They're great, and they had great chemistry, great promos, really interesting character work for both of them. Um, she's obviously remembered too for that, infamous promo where she's basically shitting on all the other divas of that time, saying things like to the Bellas that talent is not sexually transmitted. So, um, yeah, I think she was kind of just the complete package. I think the only thing maybe working against her during those times is she didn't look like the traditional diva, but she certainly rose above that and had a great career for herself. And looking back on it, because ever since I've seen like when she was on NXT, she was stealing the show even then, just with like her quirkiness and uniqueness and what she brought to the table. So um, she did a lot in her very short career. Her main roster career lasted less than 4 years. So um, no, I can't praise her enough. And then obviously I like the human being behind the character too. She's, very insightful when it comes to not only her own mental illness, but mental illness in general. So she's definitely inspirational in that way, doing a lot of like advocacy for um, mental illness. So I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, AJ definitely sits at the top of S tier. All right, who do we got here now? I'm not going to go super in depth with everybody like I did with her because we'd be here all day, but I just thought that was an important one to cover. Her face is cut off. So I'm assuming, because this looks like it's an alphabetical order, I believe this is Oksana. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm gonna put her in an F just because I mean, what did she really do at the end of the day? I barely even remember her. The most memorable thing about her was that she would like flirt with Teddy Long. Um, as a wrestler, she was pretty horrible. I mean, she was hot, easy on the eyes. That's pretty much the only reason she was there. Um, Yeah, I mean, who really cares about Oksana? Oh, and then she was in that weird storyline with Goldust. You remember that? It had to do with like NXT because like Goldust married her. So I don't know. It was just really dumb. They had nothing for her. That's why she was just in the company for 2 years. She couldn't be a wrestler. So, oh, and then she was like the valet for Cesaro. I think just like they tried so hard to find something for her to do, and it just never really panned out. I don't think she was really talented, to be quite honest. All right, so now our first male superstar, Alberto Del Rio, a very controversial figure. I personally would put him in A tier. That might draw a lot of heat, but I think because we're so far removed from the time now, a lot of people forget just how vital Del Rio was to the WWE product from like I'm gonna say 2010 to 2013. I mean, he was definitely like a force to be reckoned with, at least in the kayfabe world. They really built him up. He won the Royal Rumble, Money in the Bank, WWE Championship twice, all in the span of a year. He had a great feud with Rey Mysterio on and off. He just had great heel work in general, and he had like the entrance and the gimmick and the ring announcer and all that flair to go with it. Um, a lot of people compared him to JBL. If you ask me, he's a lot better than JBL. He was a great in-ring worker. He oftentimes had the best match of the night. Um, he was part of some very memorable segments, at least segments that I remember well being a kid. One of them in particular, it was this weird, like, I think it might have been right after the Royal Rumble because it was some sort of celebration for Del Rio, and he just like kicked Hornswoggle in the face and started beating him up until Kofi made the save. So Del Rio was hilarious. He had great comedic timing. Um, Good promos, not the best ever, but had some good matches. And then when he became a babyface in 2013, it surprisingly worked for a little bit. I mean, that was a good 5 or 6 month run where at the time I was dead against it because I thought he's born to be a villain, but it actually kind of worked. So I understand because of like, things in his personal life, he's kind of hated now. But if we're talking about the wrestling ability strictly, he's an A tier for me. Alex Riley, F. Anyone remember this guy? This was the Mrs. Protege from NXT. And, dude, I mean, for like 2 weeks, I remember it looked like he was going to be the next big thing. He got a win over The Miz, and he was tag teaming with Cena and Orton, but he fizzled out pretty quickly. He just didn't have the charisma or the in ring presence needed to be a top star. He became a jobber very quickly. Um, he had a great theme song. That's the best thing I could say about him. But no, just not memorable at all. Alicia Fox. Um, I mean D or F. I'm reluctant to put her in F because I think she really did try hard to hone her craft and improve, and she was in the company a long time. Uh, I'll put her in like very low D. I mean, sh- she tried. She had some character, the whole crazy girl persona. She's basically remembered for having two moves that look awesome: the tilt-a-whirl backbreaker and the Northern Lights suplex. Oh, and there was something else too. I don't remember, but we might move her to F later on. I mean, she didn't really do anything, but she also, I don't know, it didn't seem like she half-assed anything. She gave her best the majority of the time, so D for effort, I guess. All right, Cesaro, back when he was known as Antonio Cesaro. Now, like I said, this period covers 2008 to 2014, it looks like, so I'm not going to really assess his career after that. But for that time, I would give him probably a C. I honestly think Cesaro's very overrated by the IWC. He's not really anything special to me. He had a decent run with the United States Championship, but honestly, I think that was just because everyone was happy that Santino finally dropped the belt to somebody after hogging it for 6 months. I still don't understand why that had to happen. But the Real Americans was a cool tag team. This was around the time he won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, so it looked like he had some potential. I feel like he was really limited in the ring. Like he did like two or three moves. He couldn't really talk. There's language barrier, that sort of thing. So I don't know. He's not the worst, but like he didn't really stand out to me. But this probably was his best era. I would say he's more like a D tier overall, but this was a little bit of a good time for him. So we'll put him in C, I guess. All right, Batista. Um, okay, so his evolution run and his run with the World Heavyweight Championship on SmackDown, none of that counts because that's before the PG era. If we're talking about, fuck it, I'm still putting him in S. Batista is one of the all-time greats. Obviously, he really improved in the ring, but he didn't even have to. He had such a presence about him, and his promos got a lot better too. He had a great heel run toward the end. The whole thing where like the spotlight came down on him when he was cutting promos, that was awesome. Um, I'm including his 2014 run because even though the fans kind of hijacked it and ruined it and booed him mercilessly for reasons I still don't understand. I mean, hey, look, I'm a Daniel Bryan fan. Like, I'm wearing the shirt, but I still don't think we had to ruin Batista's return as a result. But um, yeah, I mean, I think he had a good run in 2014. He came back, reformed Evolution, put on some good matches. Um, it ended very abruptly. I think he was supposed to stay longer, but we know what happened. Um, in 2009 to early 2010, he was one of the greatest parts of SmackDown, and I mean, he'll always be a legend and one of my personal favorites, so I feel S tier is appropriate. The Bella Twins. Um, I wish I could, rank them individually because I do think Nikki's a little bit better. I'm going to give them B. I mean, I am a red-blooded male, so I'm a little bit biased because they're super hot, especially back then. But I never had a problem with them. They get a lot of hate, which I don't really understand why. I mean, they were kind of just there for the longest time. You would see them anytime like a celebrity was around, they would just be like standing next to them. Um, they got better in the ring, especially Nikki. And I mean, when you think of WWE, and especially during this time, you think of them. They paved the path for a lot of female wrestlers we see today. Which I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm several years removed from the product. I don't really watch anymore. I mean, um, but I'll always be fond of wrestling and these times that I grew up with, and seeing like history like in the Attitude Era and Ruthless Aggression Era, even a little bit before that. Those were all good times. But right now, wrestling's in a really bad state. I guess that's a topic for another video. But yeah, I do think a lot of, wrestlers today owe their careers to the Bella Twins. They definitely broke a lot of barriers. I'm not going to sit here and act like they were the greatest women wrestlers in the world, but, whenever they were on, I enjoyed them. So B tier for them. Beth Phoenix. Okay. I'll put her in B tier. That might be a little bit generous. I feel she's kind of overrated. I mean, um, in I don't know if this is a topic I should dive into, but back in the day, I never understood why people were obsessing over the likes of Beth Phoenix and Awesome Kong when we had, women wrestlers who were a lot more conventionally attractive, but I guess, people don't really care about that. But yeah, so that's a limiting factor in my enjoyment of Beth Phoenix. But as far as in ring work, she was great. She freaking carried Kelly to some great matches. She had a very memorable Divas title run that lasted a long time. So, I mean, yeah, she's cool. Not my favorite. I think low B tier is good for her. Viscera, or as he was known as Big Daddy V at the time, um, like a D. I mean, these were in his final days as a wrestler, and I, I don't know. The novelty really wore off. It was kind of a dumb gimmick. The thing I remember the most is playing as him in SmackDown versus Raw 2009, and he was really overpowered. But yeah, there's really not much to say. He could barely wrestle by the end. He had no personality really. It was kind of a joke at this point. He was like 15 years past his prime easily. Big E, I will also put in D. I don't really like Big E. He was a little more tolerable back then because around the time he was Dolph Ziggler's bodyguard, even then he was just a generic big guy, but at least he wasn't that idiot running around in the New Day. So, I mean, I don't know. The whole like thing with him in NXT, like the whole 5 count thing, that was kind of cool, but they never really capitalized on any of that. So he just kind of felt like a filler wrestler, someone to throw out there um, to kill time, basically. A great example of that is when he was Intercontinental Champion. He was just like fighting Curtis Axel every week. Like, that's the definition of filler. All right. The Big Show. A. Big Show's great. I'm putting him out of Del Rio. I'm keeping these in order as best I can. But yeah, Big Show is an all-time great, and this was a good era for him. I mean, it started out, he had the match with Mayweather, which drew a lot of hype and stuff. I didn't really care about it, but he had the tag teams with Jericho, The Miz. He had a tag team with Kane at the time. So he did a lot of things. He was starting to put over younger talent. I mean, the worst thing he did in that era, there were a couple things. But when he broke down crying in the ring, all those segments with John Laurinaitis, that was horrible. But that was not his fault. That was just the writing. Um, and then he had a really bad match with Randy Orton at Survivor Series. But again, that had more to do with booking and shit. He had a great match with Sheamus at Survivor Series the year before. So at this point, Big Show could still go in the ring. He was always entertaining, whether he was a face or a heel. And he's just another guy when you think of WWE. He was just like a larger than life wrestler. And truly one of a kind, I know a lot of people say he's like Andre the Giant, but let's be honest, he kind of transcended Andre the Giant. I mean, he was a lot better in the ring, had more charisma. I mean, Andre the Giant was just huge. That was like his whole thing. But Big Show was the complete package when it comes to like big men in WWE. All right, the Boogeyman, I'm putting him in F. I never cared about the Boogeyman at all. I mean, oh, it's a scary guy who eats worms. I mean, I always thought that shit was weird. I don't know. That was around the time when like ECW was on Sci-Fi, so they had to get weird like science fiction type characters on there. Like, does anyone remember the zombie? All right, moving on. We got Booker T. He technically did still wrestle every now and then by this point. I remember he had a program with Cody Rhodes. He helped put him over and stuff. But just for the commentary alone, I think he belongs in B tier. He he's fucking hilarious. He always said things that make you laugh. Shucky ducky quack quack. Booker T is a wrestling legend. If we're talking about his actual like heyday, I would have put him in A tier. But back when he was like WCW champion, I wasn't. That all happened like before I was born, but he seemed pretty cool. So B tier for Booker T. No, it breaks my heart to say this, but the late Bray Wyatt, also known by his real name Wyndham Rotunda. I know a lot of people are going to want me to put him in S tier, but I have to stay true to myself here. And if we're thinking about just his contribution to the PG era, he really only had a year and a half to make an impact as far as that goes. I'd put him in B tier for that time. Put him ahead of Booker and the Bellas. I mean, he looked like he had a lot of potential early on, right? Because the Wyatt family was such a cool and unique concept that kind of dominated WWE TV. Him losing to Cena at WrestleMania 30 was, I remember being really disappointed because it completely killed his aura and mystique, and he was never the same. Well, I can't say never the same because he did, win the WWE Championship in 2017, but even that kind of just felt like damage control after booking him terribly for years. And then, the whole Fiend thing, which I wasn't super into, but I mean, good for him that he got, to express himself creatively and stuff. But yeah, after WrestleMania 30, it just felt like he was in meaningless feud after meaningless feud. They broke up the Wyatt family. He was on his own for a while. It was a disaster. They sent him out there to fucking drown. He had no like help from management. He should have been a star. I mean, it's very disappointing when you think back on it. He probably could have been world champion by WrestleMania 31 had they, booked him right. But still, that match with the Wyatt family and the Shield is just awesome. It's one of probably the best six-man tag of all time because usually six-man tags are horrible. But I mean, when it comes to Bray, he had a very unique promo style and just a way about him. He was kind of good in the ring too. I mean, his match with Daniel Bryan at the Royal Rumble in 2014 was awesome. I couldn't believe the stuff he was doing. He just the guy was on another level during that time. So um, very high B tier for Bray Wyatt, I think. And don't forget too, he was also known as Husky Harris in the Nexus, but they kind of booked him to be a joke at that point. Randy Orton punted him in the skull and he was taken off television. Some people have the theory, it's kind of just a joke, but that he would have never became Bray Wyatt had it not been for that punt to the skull. Like that made him like go deranged or whatever. I don't know why Bret Hart's on this list. It might be because he had that one match at WrestleMania with Vince. So for this time period, I'm putting him in D tier because he would just make these random appearances and his heart really didn't seem in it. He seemed like he could give a fuck. And they had him randomly in there wrestling like tag team matches. Didn't he even win like the United States Championship? I don't know why he had to be shoehorned into the product so much at this point. I mean, like nobody cared. At least I didn't. He was a legend. He was great in the 80s and 90s, but like I just felt like it was unnecessary to throw him in so many segments by this point. All right, Brian Kendrick. I think that's who this is. His head's cut off, but I can tell by like the emo hair. Um, so this is basically just 2008, 2009 Brian Kendrick, who had like Ezekiel Jackson as his manager. This version of Brian Kendrick is D tier. Now he got better when he came back as like a cruiserweight. I thought he had kind of an interesting heel character, but there was really nothing special about him. I mean, very good wrestler, very solid hand, but just another guy who didn't really have much personality. Um, yeah, I don't even know what else to say about him. Brock Lesnar. All right. Now for this time period, I mean, generally speaking, Brock Lesnar is S, but I'm gonna put him in like a low A right about now because he came back in 2012. He had the great match with Cena, right? But after that, he spent like a year and a half feuding with Triple H, and the feud was such a disappointment, and all their matches were kind of crap. In fact, it was all so bad that feud. Then he had a feud with the Big Show, which no one remembered, but um, it took him beating the streak and squashing John Cena to get any of his momentum back because just associating himself with Triple H in a year-long feud, it completely killed his character. And I just, at least for me, I just remember being so done with that feud. I mean, I thought it was over when Triple H beat him at WrestleMania, and then they fought again at Extreme Rules. So, but it was a big deal when Brock came back. His match with Cena was awesome, and he was bringing back legitimacy to the WWE. I thought that was a pretty cool little angle, and I liked that they let him come back without Heyman initially. Brock's underrated on the mic. I mean, he has a very unique, unorthodox style. It felt more real. He obviously wasn't being fed scripted material. Um, so it was an interesting time for a month or two, but then the whole thing with Triple H was really bad. And then he beat the streak, which I don't really agree with looking back on it. I wish The Undertaker would have kept the streak intact before he retired, or at the very least, given it to a young talent on the way out. I mean, I thought it was kind of a bizarre decision. And then there was the squash of Cena in 2014, which was cool. I mean, Suplex City was a pretty interesting concept when it first started. So Brock in the PG era, he didn't have much to work with. He ended up having better years in his since his return to WWE. All right, I see here Brodus Clay, F tier, terrible, probably the worst wrestler on this list. I haven't seen everyone yet, but I don't even know why they bothered. I'll never understand. He was Del Rio's bodyguard, which they could have had anyone in that role, and it wouldn't have mattered. They built him up in promos for like 3 months that he was going to be this like monster heel. And I don't know how you could take anyone seriously who looks like that. He had no wrestling skill whatsoever. Um, then he comes back with that Funkasaurus gimmick, which do we even need to talk about that? That was just garbage. I don't know who thought that was a good idea. And then every week he would beat like Drew McIntyre, Ziggler, The Miz, Swagger, wrestlers I actually liked, were getting their momentum killed for this fat fuck. What were they thinking? I don't know. Brodus Clay sucks, man. Carlito, I guess he was still around in the PG era, but he didn't really do anything. Put him in like a low C because I like Carlito. He did more in the Ruthless Aggression era, obviously. He was mainly just in a tag team with Primo, which was a complete waste of his talent. But you hear the stories over the years that he was kind of lazy and didn't really um, wasn't motivated. Still, I thought he had charisma. He was good in the ring. Um, a very different kind of wrestler. So I appreciated Carlito, but um, obviously he was at the end of the road here. They were like getting ready to fire him for a while, I think. Now, who's this? Is this I was gonna say Kurt Hawkins. I can't tell because the head's cut off. It looks like just a guy. I can't tell. I have no idea. Is it Charlie Haas maybe? I wish they wouldn't do this. Put a picture in that like you can actually see the people's faces. If it's Charlie Haas, he's an F. He was basically worthless by this point. Chavo. And now we're not talking about Chavo from the Ruthless Aggression era who had some good matches and was part of the SmackDown 6. We're talking about the Chavo that was beaten up by Hornswoggle every week. So that guy's going an F. I don't know. I mean, his last feud was with Sin Cara, and it really didn't do anything for Sin Cara. It just made Sin Cara look like a loser for even associating with this clown. Obviously, Chavo had some in-ring talent, but I think he got a little too big for his bridges and thought he was great, so he requested his release. But yeah, he's never half the wrestler Eddie Guerrero was. He was just whatever, kind of a mid-carder. Jericho. This one's interesting because I'm not the biggest Jericho fan in the world, but he had some good moments in this era. I'm gonna put him in B tier because he started out the PG era great, where he came out every week in a suit, had a great feud with Shawn Michaels. He had a great like, because in the Ruthless Aggression era, late Attitude era, he's kind of more just like a jokester, and I hate gimmicks like that, where everyone's like trying to be The Rock. Only one person can do that, and that is the Great One himself. But when it comes to Jericho, I hated his goofiness, but when he had a more serious demeanor, this was probably his peak as a wrestler for me. Um, his tag team with Edge and then eventually Jericho, that was all cool. He kind of fizzled out toward the end of that run, but then he came back and had a great feud with Punk. He was the perfect foil to Punk's character at the time. So I do appreciate Jericho for that. And then he'd come back every so often at like the Rumble, and he could still go, and he was putting young guys over and stuff. So I have no complaints about Jericho from this time period. This is probably when he was at his best, but still, he's not like an all-time great for me, like some of you may think. It all comes down to preference when it comes to these wrestlers, and I'm not his biggest fan. Chris Masters, D tier. I put him in the same sort of category as like Alicia Fox, where he did try to improve and he did get a little better, but nobody cared. And that has a lot to do with like just bad booking. He was basically a jobber when he came back. He was having decent matches. I remember watching like remember that show Superstars? It was just on like WWE.com or something. He would have like a 20-minute banger with like Drew McIntyre or some of these other guys. And him and like JTG of all people would have a good match. Like this guy got better. He had no personality and he lost his physique and just the novelty wore off. Nobody cared about the master lock at this point. So it is what it is when it comes to this guy. Christian, Captain Charisma. Easy A tier for me. Probably ahead of all of these guys, yeah. Um, so fucking underrated. Christian is awesome. I mean, like, especially as a heel. I mean, he had so much character and personality, and he knew how to work a crowd and how to get everyone to hate him. And he was great as like a kind of weaselly, cowardly character, but someone who also won matches and backed it up in the ring and looked really convincing. Um, his matches were just always awesome. Like his feud with Randy Orton was unbelievable at the time. It did go a little long for my liking, but I almost didn't care because you knew that those two were going to put on great matches always. He started out the PG era as the ECW champion. Um, I thought that was a good little showcase for him. I know people don't like the fact that he was on that show in the first place, but he made it watchable. I understand it was looked at like as a demotion for them, but he was just basically beating everybody up every week. It was pretty cool, and he had that peep show. He was a good baby face too, because he has so much versatility. He can be like an underdog, and then he can also be like the little weasel everyone hates. He's awesome. He was getting hurt a lot during this time period, unfortunately, just aging and stuff. It's too bad. It's derailed his momentum on certain occasions. Um, this he had to retire in 2014 at least temporarily because he's back now in AEW, still killing it. Looks better than ever. I mean, and this guy's a workhorse too. I have nothing but respect for Christian. Great wrestler. All right, this guy. I don't know how people feel today given everything that's happened, but for me, nothing's changed. CM Punk is S tier. Now, I'm not gonna get into like his personal life or stuff going on in AEW. I'm not really concerned with any of that. We are just talking about CM Punk in the PG era, and to me, CM Punk is the greatest thing to come out of the PG era. I know we still have many more wrestlers to go, but he's number one already. I can tell you right now, at least for me. And it's not just because of the pipe bomb. He's done stuff that's way cooler than the pipe bomb. he also started out the PG era as like ECW champion. So he was kind of just finishing his run there, won the Money in the Bank right away because, Jeff Hardy got suspended and stuff. But he won the World Heavyweight Championship. That run was kind of a fluke, but it was a sign of things to come because he had promo ability even back then. Like, I remember it's a very random promo, probably no one remembers it, but of just him standing up to JBL, and it was like, wow, this guy's a freaking badass. And, I definitely looked up to him, and he's one of the reasons I'm straight edge today, and I refuse to do drugs or anything like that. So I think that sends a really good message. But yeah, I mean, obviously the feud with Jeff Hardy was fantastic. And that really cemented him as a good heel, some great character development. He started the Straight Edge Society, which was really cool and an underrated aspect of SmackDown at that time. He wasn't given much to do. He was having random feuds with like the Big Show. I think if he was booked more properly, he could have really taken off even earlier. His stuff with the new Nexus was awesome. I don't care what anyone says. That was really compelling television for like 3 or 4 months. He had a good feud with Orton, good matches. And this is all like pre-pipe bomb shit. Most of the stuff would come later on. He has one of my favorite matches of all time with Cena at Money in the Bank. I mean, I was like 11 years old, I believe. And it was just like I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I knew I was witnessing a classic. I mean, and the story leading up to it was incredible. Um, he may have come back a little prematurely, but I think I think he still did all right for himself. I mean, I know losing to Triple H and all of this stuff, losing to Del Rio and Hell in a Cell, all of that did derail his momentum. But by the time he beat Del Rio again at Survivor Series, he had a really good run with that WWE Championship. At least the first part of it, leading up like to Raw 1000, he became like the most convincing babyface in the company. He went from this like sadistic heel who was like singing to Rey Mysterio's kid and doing all these like heinous things to all of a sudden, like overnight, becoming over with the crowd, and everyone loved him. And he's the guy telling Jericho, I'm out here swimming with sharks while you're dancing with stars. This guy just had so many clever one liners and great disses. Um, I mean, he's probably one of the greatest on the mic of all time. I mean, I don't think that can be disputed. I mean, I know there's some that are ahead of him, mainly from the new generation era. Hogan, on Savage, Piper, obviously Stone Cold, The Rock, but after that, you got to put Punk right in there, at least in the conversation in the top 10. As a wrestler, he's not the greatest of all time, especially by today's standards, but I think he had a great sense of, in-ring psychology and stuff. He knew how to make a match work, every element of it, and make the audience anticipate what's coming next and stuff. So the only thing that was bad about Punk during this PG era was when he came back in 2013. He obviously had, no passion anymore. And I'm not really going to speak to whether or not I agree with him or not when it comes to all that stuff. But the fact of the matter is, he wasn't the same performer at that time. He was also saddled in really bad feuds with like Ryback and Kane. It was just, I don't know what they were thinking as far as the booking's concerned. But slightly before that, a little bit after Raw 1000, or I'm gonna say maybe later than that, right around the time they gave him Heyman again, and like he shaved his head and stuff, I lost interest in Punk kind of. I mean, he seemed like even then he was phoning it in, and his match with Undertaker, a lot of you praise it. I don't think it was that good. I think pretty much after Raw 1000, everything fell apart. He shouldn't have been turned heel. I think that was a big mistake. he was rivaling Cena in merch. I mean, I liked him way more than Cena at the time, and I was a kid during that time period. Missed opportunity there. They could have kept the baby face thing going for a long time, but they needed him to be a heel for The Rock, so they could have Cena Rock too, which is fucking bullshit and still pisses me off to this day. But well, when you look back at the career of Punk in WWE, you can't complain. I mean, he had, even before the pipe bomb, he was already established. He um he went from the brash upstart on ECW, having like match of the week regularly, um, to kind of becoming an arrogant heel, to the kind of heel that's more like a cult leader with both the Straight Edge Society and the Nexus. Then the pipe bomb happens, the great matches with Cena, that epic WWE title run, his great matches with Bryan and the whole love triangle with AJ. He has so many memorable matches, so many memorable storylines, so many memorable promos. As a wrestler during this time, I can't praise CM Punk enough. And I still look back on those times fondly. I don't care what's happened since with him. It will never taint my image of him, at least during that time. He was like modern day Stone Cold. Maybe not to that level, but when I was a kid, he felt like that to me. He was that kind of superstar that I gravitated towards. Just like a lot of, older folks now can talk about how Stone Cold was that person for them. I think I was on that tangent about Punk for like 10 minutes, but all of that had to be addressed. I mean, he's one of the all time greats as far as I'm concerned. Cody Rhodes. Or in this picture, it looks like this is when he was dashing Cody Rhodes. If we were talking about Cody Rhodes now, it would be F tier because I don't understand why people like him and think he's a main eventer. There's nothing special about him at all. But I kind of liked him back then. I think the highlight of his career during this time, anyway, was when he was undashing, when he had that like mask and he had kind of a gimmick similar to Mankind. I think, that was interesting. He had a good feud with Mysterio, good feud with Orton. They didn't really do anything with him, but he was just entertaining on a weekly basis. Uh, Dashing Cody Rhodes was kind of stupid. I mean, the he did the best he could with it, but it was just a dumb gimmick. I don't like Legacy, and we'll talk about that later when we get to another Legacy member, but I like the concept of it, but they just did it so shitty. Um so I'm trying to think of a place to put him because he had his ups and downs. When he was in a tag team with Goldust against the Shield, that was kind of interesting. But I think he became Stardust toward the end of this PG era, and obviously that was a disaster. Um, he had a really good run with the Intercontinental Championship, I remember. Um, I'll put him in like, I like him more than Cesaro. I will put him in like a B tier. That may be a little generous because he had time periods where I wasn't interested in him at all. Mainly Legacy days and when he was Stardust. All of that sucked, but he had enough good in there where I feel like he can be B tier. But honestly, I do feel like a lot of that has more to do with the booking and the storylines than anything he did. I don't think he himself is like that special of a wrestler. In the ring, he's average. He might be a little better now, but I don't know. All right, Crime Time. F. I don't care about them at all. I mean, for like a week, Shad seemed like he was gonna be cool when he turned on JTG, but that just went literally nowhere. JTG beat him in a match, and then Shad was like released after. Rest in peace to Shad, by the way. But and then JTG was just a jobber for life. So, and as a tag team, I didn't care about them at all. Kurt Hawkins is an F too. He's not funny. He's not charming. He sucks. He's not even good in the ring. He was an edgehead too, which that was fucking stupid. Um, Curtis Axel, or was he Michael McGillicuddy at this time? Yeah, he's right there with like Brian Kendrick as like a low D. Nobody remembers him. I mean, in the ring, he was average at best. The whole Curtis Axel thing is like still bewildering. He is repackaged, beats Triple H 3 times. He won the IC title, and then he became a jobber. And somewhere in between, he was like in a tag team with Ryback. It was just what a weird career he had. And he was also in Nexus, but he was like the at best the fourth best member of that group. So is that D'Lo Brown? I'll put him in D tier too. I have no idea why he was even around. I all I remember, he had a match with like Santino or something. It was just weird they brought him back, especially because they didn't do anything with him. Damian Sandow, I'm putting him in D too. This guy's overrated. I'm sorry, but like he wasn't good in the ring at all. In fact, he seemed very sloppy sometimes, and he had like 2 moves. His finisher was literally like an elbow or some shit. He was the first wrestler other than Cena to lose Money in the Bank. And at least when Cena did it, it was because like he had scheduled a match with Punk in advance, a cash in, and then Big Show interfered or whatever. But this guy outright lost to Cena. I understand that's not his fault. That's just the booking, but like it was a joke. He was never meant to be taken seriously. He was a comedy gimmick. I remember at the time people were clamoring for him to be like world champion, and I never understood it. He when he got on Raw 1000, when he got beat up by DX, I was like, good, he's a jobber. That's what he should be there for. Mr. Daniel Bryan. Got the yes shirt going on right here. I think I can put him in A tier. He's not S tier. I'm sorry, guys. You know, Daniel Bryan had a great run and he really like exceeded expectations. I understand he did great things on the indies, but as far as like WWE is concerned, I don't think anyone thought he would become what he did. Because when he first started out, you know, he was on NXT as the Miz's protege, and the Miz just like embarrassed him every week. But then he came up, became US champion. That was a decent little run. I think he lost the title to Sheamus. When he won Money in the Bank in 2011, and that's when his like main event push started, it was really surprising. It came out of nowhere because he wasn't a jobber, but he was kind of just there. I mean, best I could compare him to is like a Finn Balor as like a modern day example. He was just like seemed to have no prospects for like a main event future, but then he wins Money in the Bank, and you know the rest is history. He had a great heel run in 2012. Some great matches with Punk. I already talked a little bit about the love triangle thing. Had had an awesome match with Sheamus, which is one of the most memorable matches of that time to me. I'm not talking about the 18-second one. That was kind of bullshit in hindsight. And when I was a kid, I loved Sheamus, so I mean, I didn't mind too much. But like looking back on it, that was like awful. But people have said that if that didn't happen, it wouldn't have sparked the Yes movement. So I guess some things do happen for a reason. It's great he got his moment at WrestleMania 30. It's a little unfortunate it was at Batista's expense, but I do think Batista was a good sport about it. He put Bryan over and stuff. Um, I mean, where's I going with this? Oh, also Team Hell No. That was an interesting little thing. I didn't think something like that was possible because when Kane wants to be, he's fucking hilarious. Same with Brian. They had great chemistry together. Those segments with Dr. Shelby were really amusing. So Daniel Bryan was very versatile during this time. He was babyface at one point, then heel, then babyface again. I mean, if it weren't for injuries, he would have had a longer career in WWE. He did come back and do some cool things, but no, he definitely exceeded expectations and made a success of himself. And as a wrestler, there's hardly anyone better than him. I mean, he's not the greatest high flyer ever, but like when it comes to like technical wrestling, he's the best. And I'm not like super into that, into like mat based wrestling and stuff with submission holds. But if that's what you're looking for, Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson, that's your guy. And then of course the whole yes, yes, yes slogan, which is definitely a cool little phase for sure. All right. Darren Young is an F. I mean, let's be real. He was a jobber. Um, he had no talent. He was always the worst part of any group or stable he was in. He just really brought nothing to the table at all. David Hart Smith. Pretty much the same as Darren Young. I mean, this guy wasn't good at all. He was probably worse than Darren Young. At least you can make fun of Darren Young. This guy had nothing about him. He might as well be the generic template of a creator wrestler in a WWE video game. Just trash. David Otunga, I'll give him like a D. He sucked in the ring. Basically, the only thing that was good about him was his semi decent promo ability and his little gimmick there as John Laurinaitis' right hand man. It was kind of entertaining. So his commentary is dreadful, but that was not in the PG era, so he's safe from F tier as far as the PG era is concerned. Um, Dean Ambrose, wait, he was in the PG era. Oh, the Shield, right? Okay. Um, this is probably when Dean was at his best because I mean, oh, he fell off hard in WWE. Um, remember when we thought this guy was going to be the star? I certainly thought so. I mean, even before the Shield was around, because I was really in tune with WWE during this time, like 2011, 2012. I was a super fan, and I knew all that like FCW guys and stuff. And like this guy seemed like the number one prospect. I thought he was going to be a champion for years to come. Um, so when it comes to the PG era, we're just looking at his Shield days and like a little bit after that when he broke off onto his own. I'll give him low A tier. In the early days of the Shield and even like right before it ended, he always stood out the most. Honest to God. His promos were great, even though he was held back a little bit and had to be restrained. He couldn't be that crazed gimmick that he had in some of these like indie promotions. He had a really vicious style in the ring. He wasn't like a great wrestler, but he seemed convincing. He seemed like a badass. I don't know. I thought he was cool. I mean, he seemed like the leader of the Shield, especially early on. It's really disappointing how his career turned out. He had so much potential. That's pretty much my feelings on Dean during this time. When he left the Shield, he had an awful feud with Rollins, and they 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 made him a complete dork and a goofball, and just his gimmick sucked after that. He was a borderline comedy gimmick in the main events somehow. They dropped the ball with him so bad. Well, I think it's a combination of things. They dropped the ball with him, but it seemed like he lost his edge. He wasn't like, I don't know this for a fact, but it just appears he didn't try as hard after the Shield was over. He just kind of started phoning it in. All right. Kevin Nash, Diesel. The only time he was around in the PG era, well, he had a couple Rumble appearances, but He's mainly remembered for ruining the summer of Punk. Eh, I'll put him in a low C tier just because some of his promos against like Punk and Triple H were really funny, like unintentionally. I don't think they're supposed to be, but just for comedic value. Um, that sledgehammer ladder match with Triple H was actually like kind of entertaining. I haven't watched it in a long time. I get that it's probably a train wreck objectively, but I remember being entertained by it. It was a really weird direction to take the feud. I mean, who would have ever thought that the Summer of Punk would have just turned into Nash versus Triple H again? But like, it was fine. It was a decent little send off for him. So yeah, I mean, and plus Kevin Nash seems cool outside the ring, so I'll give him a pass. Low C tier for this era. Dolph Ziggler. Put him in a low A, right behind Ambrose. I mean, there were so many times where it seemed like Ziggler was going to break out and become this massive star. It never materialized, and it's too bad. He had a lot of talent. He often stealed the show, as his gimmick would suggest. He got better on the mic. He just, I don't know. He had like a flair and arrogance and charisma about him, like uh, in a way that like Shawn Michaels did. I mean, maybe not to that level, but like this guy was going places, but he had the rug pulled from under him so many times. Um, he was buried by Edge in his first World Heavyweight Championship run, which was basically a fluke victory. I didn't mind that because I loved Edge at the time, which looks like we're getting to him shortly. But the time I remember being most behind Ziggler was when he won Money in the Bank. He was just on another level. And then he did get that world title reign, which came to an unfortunate end due to injury, but it was just start stop pushes with him. It really pissed me off because you wanted to see the guy do good things, and it just felt like they were never going to commit to him. And of course, they never did, really. Um, he could go back and forth from being a face and a heel. Um, the whole thing with Vicky was kind of weird. I mean, I guess you can say she did help elevate him, but I don't think he even needed her. I mean, if they wanted to put her with Swagger, that's understandable because Swagger couldn't cut a promo to save his life. But yeah, they could have done so much more with Ziggler. I was always behind him. Drew McIntyre. We're not talking about Drew now because Drew is obviously, it's well documented now. He's really improved and made a success out of himself. I love seeing stories like that. But when it comes to this time period, mm, I'm gonna give him a low B. I know he didn't do much during this time, but I always thought he was great. Like I was talking about earlier, I kind of alluded to it. He was having great matches with like Chris Masters and some of these other guys, even when he was a jobber. The Chosen One gimmick, it was definitely a little bit premature, but I don't know. There was something cool about seeing like him and Sheamus, and I guess even the Miz, this new crop of talent that were young and hungry, just trying to grab the brass ring. Um, so he had his moments. He had a decent little mini feud with Edge. He was also part of 3MB toward the end of the PG era, which the gimmick itself was stupid, but he was always the highlight of that group. I don't know. I just think he always did the best he could with what he was given. Obviously, he was young and green and still learning. Um, I'll always remember he had a bizarre like storyline where he was like uh wanting to be with like Kelly. I don't know even know why they did that, but um I don't know. I'm torn if he should be low B tier. He's probably more like C. He just didn't do much during this time period, but the potential was there. It was kind of like Ziggler, but at least with McIntyre, you can rationalize it now because he did become a better performer and Wood went on to win a world championship. I know Ziggler did too, but Ziggler never really went anywhere. And then, ironically, the two of them would be in a tag team, but that's a whole different story. We'll talk about that if we do a modern wrestlers tier list. Oh my god, I'm at an hour already. How much longer do we have to go? Ooh. Yeah, we're at the letter E. Alright, I'm going to try to go through some of these a little faster if I can. Not this guy, though. Edge is going right in this tier. Other than CM Punk, he's probably the greatest wrestler of this era. His career was cut tragically short. I mean, he did come back, which, good for him. I don't care if it's not the greatest run. I'm just glad he got to come back and end his career on his terms. Edge is an all-time great, and he was particularly awesome during this time period. I mean, he did have a lot of cronies around him early on, like the Edgeheads, Chavo, and Vicky. None of that was necessary. Just let him go out there and be the performer he is. He didn't need all of that. Typically, you give people a manager or a faction when, like, they can't cut promos. And Edge could cut promos, like, in spades. Now, I know there's, like, Evolution, but that was, like, a super group. But when it comes to these, like, types of factions, Edge did not need to be in one. He had that great match with Undertaker, multiple great matches. The one at WrestleMania, there was a Hell in a Cell match, a TLC match. I mean, and obviously credit to Undertaker too, but like that was a great feud. Edge was on another level as a heel. He was so hated. He had such a great gimmick as like the ultimate opportunist and stuff. Um, he was just naturally funny. He could be devious and cunning when he needed to be, sometimes legitimately scary. He was a great babyface too. I remember when I really started getting into it. I mean, in the early PG era, I was kind of more of a casual fan, but by like late 2010, when Edge was traded to SmackDown, I was really getting into it and into wrestling. And he was always the wrestler I looked forward to seeing the most. He had a great run with the World Heavyweight Championship. I mean, that SmackDown Elimination Chamber match in 2011 is one of my favorite all-time matches from that era. He and Mysterio competed for like 10 minutes, like at the end. It was just awesome. Um, and he went out on top. He went out as World Heavyweight Champion. I was devastated when he retired. I was hoping it was a work, but just the way they were doing it, um, it became apparent pretty quick that no, he was legitimately retiring. It was sad, but um, Edge could do anything. Great face, great heel, great mic worker, really solid hand in the ring. He wasn't even really slowing down. He was still super athletic, and Edge might be the greatest all-around wrestler ever. And what I mean by that is like he's not like the best at any one particular thing, but he's really solid at like virtually everything. He has no weaknesses. He's the kind of main event talent you want. Elijah Burke is an F. I don't think I even need to explain why. He's just I didn't even know he was around in the PG era. He must have been just inactive the whole time before they released him, just like JTG. No talent at all. Eric Escobar is also an F for the same reason. Eric Rowan, he was always the worst member of the Wyatt family. I'm putting him in D tier. He was just kind of there. He was that guy with the big beard. Evan Bourne, I was a big fan of Evan Bourne. I'm putting him in B tier. They never pushed him though, and I never understood why. I understand they were probably limited by the fact that he probably couldn't cut a promo. I mean, I don't know. I never heard him cut a promo. Maybe he's great at it, but he never got the opportunity. I'm assuming he can't cut promos. But just his in-ring work alone, and he had like a Ricky Steamboat kind of feel to him, where he was just like the ultimate babyface, the ultimate good guy, ultimate underdog. The highlight of his career ended up being that tag team with Kofi, Air Boom, and it didn't even last long. I mean, um, it's sad how his career in WWE ended. He could have been more. I always was always behind him. One of the most talented guys they had, at least in the ring. Eve Torres. Um, Eve's an A for me. I mean, I think she's really underrated. Nobody talks about her when it comes to like the all-time great women's wrestlers, but man, she worked her ass off and improved so much by the end. She started out in the PG era as just a ring announcer, but uh, slowly but surely they put her in the ring, and she was kind of just a generic babyface character at first, but it worked. She was hot. She had the cheerleading background. She was getting better in the ring and stuff. But I think what everyone remembers the most when it comes to Eve is her heel turn and just the character she had, how she became like a super cruel bitch. It was good stuff. Um, she put Caitlyn over on the way out. Um, I have a lot of respect for Eve. She really honed her craft, and she went out on top. And might have felt like she left prematurely, but she did what she wanted to in life. She didn't feel binded by the WWE system, and that's a good thing. A lot of times wrestlers can't escape, but she left and no, never looked back. So good for her. But she had a great match with Beth Phoenix that Survivor Series. I say great for the times and what they were allowed to do. Back then, they were given 5-10 minutes at the most to compete. Ezekiel Jackson is F tier. He's one of the worst wrestlers on this list. I mean, the fact they made him the last ECW champion ever was a joke in of itself. As if that wasn't bad enough, they had to include him in the core. I mean, Wade Barrett really needed some momentum after Cena like killed the whole Nexus angle. Why did anyone think it was a good idea to put Ezekiel Jackson in a group with him? And even worse, later on, Jackson beat Barrett in a match to become IC champ. Thankfully, that was short lived. And right after that, he pretty much faded from TV. Thank God. The guy had no talent whatsoever. Is this Fandango? Speaking of no talent whatsoever, I'm putting him in F tier too. I don't care what people think. The fact Jericho lost him at WrestleMania was a terrible booking decision. I get wanting to put young talent over, but this guy was already like 35 and had no prospects of a future. He was in developmental forever, and they saddled him with this terrible gimmick. It reminded me a lot of what they did with Brodus Clay. And for like 6 months at least, they just shoved him down your throat. And like, yes, I get that the crowd was into it and singing along, but they didn't care about him. They just liked that stupid song. So I don't know, man. Who cares about freaking Fandango? Festus. Um, does this count Luke Gallows too? They're basically the same person. Well, Festus is an F, but if we're talking about Luke Gallows, maybe we'll give him a D. He got better in the ring, and I mean, he was a good, disciple for Punk and stuff in the Straight Edge Society. Festus and Jesse were like a nothing tag team. In fact, I see Jesse right here. He's going in F. Finley. Now, this is Finley in the PG era, so he wasn't cool anymore. He wasn't even a heel. This is when they had him with like Hornswoggle. Garbage. He should have retired like a few years before he did. Gail Kim. To be honest, I don't really remember her. I hear people say she's great in the ring. All I really know about her is that she walked out in a battle royal. I don't know. I don't know what to give her. I give her a D. She was never on TV. I don't even know how to assess her. Um, Goldust. Goldust is like a D. He's nothing special. I mean, the gimmick really wore off by then. I think the only time people cared about him during the PG era was during that tag team with Cody, and even that fizzled out like really fast. Heath Slater. Give him a D. I mean, he was funny sometimes, and when he had that losing streak gimmick to the Legends, um, but he's basically a career jobber. I mean, um, he wasn't really that good in the ring. I guess that's the best thing I can say about him is that he was like occasionally funny. All right, Triple H S. I don't care. Y'all can hate Triple H all you want. Um, you can call him a glory hog or whatever, but I think he's great. I mean, one of the all-time great wrestlers. I mean, and during this time period, he was WWE champion. He had a solid reign on SmackDown. He became part-time shortly after. His matches with The Undertaker freaking blew my mind as a kid. I understand him interjecting himself into the Summer of Punk was unnecessary, but it led to some decent things. Like I said, I kind of enjoyed the match with him and Nash, sledgehammer ladder match and stuff. And also the Raw walkout was a really interesting angle. I wish they let that go a little longer because it was very compelling television. Um, but his feud with Brock was really bad. We talked about that earlier. Um, he did turn heel during this time too, and it was much needed. He After the Brock feud, he was so stale, but that breathed some life into him right around the time he shaved his head, and he became like that authority figure. And I mean, say what you will about that. I understand they dominated a lot of TV time, but I feel like that's okay because Triple H can cut a 20-minute promo without being boring. He always has um, like compelling dialogue and stuff. So um, yeah, and I mean, he had a great match with Bryan at WrestleMania. So, I mean, anything Triple H was a part of felt like a big deal. I would say that, like, the only thing that was bad about Triple H during this era was the Brock feud. Oh, and the fact he had to beat Punk at Night of Champions was unfortunate. But regardless, Triple H is still S tier for me. Hornswoggle, I'll give Hornswoggle C. I mean, he was entertaining, not really meant to be taken seriously and stuff, but he played the role to perfection and stuff. Um, and that WLC match was like legitimately good. Um, really surprised when I saw that, but I'm like, this is actually like very entertaining. And like El Torito is a good wrestler too, and Hornswoggle held his own as well. Hunico and Camacho, mm, give them like low C tier because there's a few reasons why. Unico was the Sin Cara, like, uh, not Azul, but the other one, uh, when he had like the black mask and stuff. And I was kind of intrigued by that storyline as a kid. I think he was the better Sin Cara. He was more reliable in the ring, didn't botch as much. Um, he had some good matches in NXT actually with Seth Rollins when he was first coming up. Uh, I don't know, they were a decent hand. I mean, Camacho was kind of just a generic big man, but it worked. I mean, they were all right. Swagger, Swagger's like C tier. I mean, not. I wouldn't say he had no charisma. He couldn't cut a promo, but he had some like physical charisma. Like he kind of carried himself like a star at certain points. When he came back with Zeb Coulter, he seemed like he was going to be legitimate and stuff. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. He had like a DUI bust, I think, so that derailed any main event push they had planned for him. But like I was talking about earlier when I mentioned Cesaro, the Real Americans were pretty cool. Um, he was given the world heavyweight title way too early. He was not ready for it. He was solid in the ring. I mean, good mid Carter, reliable. Um, but I don't think he ever had quite what it took to be a main eventer. Like I don't look at him in the same way I look at Ziggler. Not even close. The weirdest thing I recall about Swagger was when he was like Michael Cole's trainer. Anyone remember that? That was just like so random. JBL. This is toward the end of JBL's career. He became a commentator again during the PG era. Oh man, I don't know. I'm gonna put him like in high D. Low C, because he still had good character work. I don't know if you guys remember, he was hated as a heel and stuff. He had the crowd in the palm of his hand a lot. His in-ring work really diminished by this point. And on commentary, I can take or leave him. He's just kind of there. I mean, he is a classic WWE voice, but um, he's not the greatest commentator. So I think C is a good spot for him. Jeff Hardy is absolutely S for me. This is another example. We're not going to talk about his personal life or things going on of that nature, but as far as a wrestler in the PG era, I mean, I idolized Jeff Hardy. I thought he was so cool, and um, I loved his like daredevil persona, and he really resonated with a lot of fans. Um, I don't know if he's a great worker, like a traditional worker, but he didn't have to be. He had so many cool moves, and he had a great storyline with Punk. This was probably the highlight of his career because he became WWE champion and world heavyweight champion twice. He was immensely popular. He probably more than Cena, at least for a short period of time. Um, if he was a little more reliable and didn't have as many personal demons, he probably could have been the face of the company. It's unfortunate how it turned out, but we'll always have this time with Jeff Hardy to reflect on, and I'm really glad he did reach that career high. Um, it was definitely a spectacle seeing him at this time. No, because at one time in the Ruthless Aggression era, no one thought Jeff Hardy would ever make it as a single star. So I'm glad he was able to overcome the obstacles it took to be a main eventer. Because he left the company in the Ruthless Aggression era, but came back and was more over than ever. And I really liked him as a kid. I thought he was just amazing. Jerry the King Lawler. I'm gonna give him a B tier. So the thing with Lawler is like after he came back from the heart attack, which was or cardiac arrest, which all that was really unfortunate, and I remember that happening live. It was very upsetting. I knew it wasn't a work. I was very concerned. But when he came back, he was never really the same. But he was a babyface commentator at this point. He was kind of funny sometimes. Sometimes he was kind of annoying. Um, I was weirdly intrigued by his program with The Miz. He still kind of held his own in the ring for a 60-year-old man or however old he was. So yeah, I got no problems with the King. I mean, he's a legend. Is this Jillian Hall F garbage? No talent and the worst singing voice I've ever heard. JR wasn't around much. by this point, or he went to SmackDown briefly with Taz. He left. He came back again briefly on Monday Night Raw, but it was just mainly sporadic appearances. Uh, put him right here in B tier. I think it was always great when he was around, but I think he definitely lost a step. And um, if he was around more, I would probably put him in A tier. But he was barely there anymore. Who is this? I see Kane on the bottom here. We might have to come back to this person. I don't even know who this is. Oh, is it Jinder Mahal? If it is, F tier. Just fucking horrible. Cena. Some of y'all are gonna scoff at me for this. I don't know whether to put him at A or B. I'll give him like a really low A because I'm unsure. I have a love-hate relationship with Cena, especially during this time period. I understand a lot of you think he killed wrestling, when in fact, the reality is he kind of kept it alive during this time. There weren't a lot of stars. Like, if you think about it, and Randy Orton's not really a star, I don't think. Once Batista, Shawn Michaels left, and Jeff Hardy left as well during that time, Undertaker and Triple H were part time. Edge retired. Pretty much Cena was the only star until Punk came around. So you got to give him credit. At least he was a name. With that said, he ruined so many careers. Um, I don't know if it was backstage politics or just booking, probably a mixture of both. What happened with Wade Barrett was a travesty, and that's just one example. He was shoved down your throat constantly. I think the worst period of Cena, where I despised him the most, because when I first got into wrestling, I did like Cena, being a little kid and stuff. But after the match with Brock, when Brock first came back, that time period where he was feuding with John Laurinaitis and Big Show, and he won Money in the Bank, and he won the Rumble, and he beat The Rock at WrestleMania. It was just like it was too much Cena. For like a good year and a half, they shoved him down your throat worse than ever. This is when he was wearing like the green shirt. I don't know why at that stage in his career they felt the need to shove him on the screen every second. It wasn't 2007 anymore, you know? But Cena is also responsible for a lot of great moments in WWE during that time. His first feud with The Rock, I'm not talking about the one that happened for the WWE Championship. That was garbage. Once in a lifetime should have stood, but they had to give Cena his win back, of course. But the first feud, it was great. And it really felt comparable to like the Rock and Hogan feud, maybe even better because this was a year in advance. I understand it wasn't consistent, like they would only meet up like for promos like every few months, but it that was great. Obviously, his feud with Punk is like legendary. I do think Cena is a big part of it. He was the perfect foil for Punk and stuff. Um, he had a great match with Daniel Bryan at SummerSlam in 2013. For as much as I'm not like, I respect him now, but like at the time I wasn't really a fan. But even then, I knew and I respected that he had a lot of great matches. I mean, he's great at promos too. He's kind of corny, but like, when he wants to, he can cut a serious promo, and he has a way with words and stuff and ways to captivate the audience. Um, One of the dumbest things I thought they did with him was the whole rise above hate bullshit. Remember that when he was feuding with Kane, and Zack Ryder was involved and they teased him turning heel. That was all just bullshit. And then he started making out with Eve Torres at one point. That was just like a complete filler storyline for right before he fought The Rock. So yeah, Cena, he has his good, he has his bad, but like it or not, he kind of defines the PG era. He was a big part of it. It's kind of like comparing to like the Rolling Stones, in the rock band from the 60s and 70s and I guess 80s too, where like I like some of their songs, but they have so many songs, they're bound to have a few good songs, but I'm not like super crazy about them. That's kind of how I feel about Cena. Cena's just been part of so many WWE moments that he's bound to strike gold at some point when it comes to his matches and promos. I don't know if that makes sense, but um, yeah, I mean, he did get a lot better in the ring. I'll give him credit for that. Um, and I will say, and this may be the result of them shoving him down his throat, but it got to a point with Cena where everything he was in felt pretty big time. And if he wasn't actively burying someone, um, then people benefited from working with him. People like Kevin Owens, although that was after the PG era. Anyways, enough about Cena. Because now it's like the kind of PTSD. I'm remembering all the like shit I didn't like about Cena at that time. John Morrison, A tier. He was great. Fucking underutilized. I mean, twice. I mean, I know this doesn't have anything to do with the PG era, but when they brought him back, they wasted him even worse than they did the first time. But anyways, this guy could have been WWE champion. He wasn't that bad on the mic. I mean, his voice did sound kind of like nasally and feminine, but if he could have worked on that, like the tone and cadence of his voice, I think he could have been a star. Because he was kind of funny on the mic sometimes, actually. Um, One of the greatest in-ring talents I've ever seen. He wasn't just a typical high flyer who did high spots just for the sake of it. His spots made sense. When he did a high flying move, it was like parkour style. It was innovative. He used like the ring and like his entire environment to his advantage and stuff. So very interesting style. Um, Anytime there was a John Morrison match, I was immediately interested. The reason he's not S tier is he didn't really do enough. It's not his fault, but like he wasn't part of any memorable storylines really that I can remember, which is too bad. Whoever thought the Miz would have become the star? And I like the Miz too, which we'll get to him at some point. But yeah, John Morrison, just I can't praise his in ring work enough. Josh Matthews, he's an alright little commentator. I hear he got really bad like in TNA, but as far as his WWE commentary is concerned, he's alright. He was just on SmackDown mainly, and he was kind of like the straight man to Michael Cole's heel character. He filled in for Jerry Lawler a lot, so he was alright. He became a familiar voice of my childhood for sure. Justin Gabriel, I'm gonna put him in like high C tier. He's kind of in the same category as Drew McIntyre, where I liked him and he had a lot of talent, but they just didn't do anything with him. When Nexus first started, other than Wade Barrett, he seemed like he was going to be the breakout star. But of course, once again, he was held back by the fact he couldn't cut promos. I mean, that's really going to limit your shelf life in WWE if you're not like great on the mic. I think Rey Mysterio might be the only exception ever to that. You got to have a personality. That's what people really care about at the end of the day. You know, The Rock and Stone Cold didn't have to be in-ring wizards to captivate an audience. It was their character and it was their promo delivery mainly. And just their aura and presence about them and their gimmick. All of that matters. That is like 90% of being a wrestler, in my opinion. Justin Roberts is like a D. I always found him extremely annoying. I don't have any nostalgia for him. I always like Tony Chimmel much more. John Cena. I was like, get the fuck out of here, dude. All right, Caitlyn. Caitlyn's awesome. I'm putting her in B tier. She had a very short WWE career. I wish she was able to do more, but she always had a very unique look. And I must be honest, I think she's super sexy, at least back then. And she got much better in the ring. Talked a little bit about her program with Eve earlier, and that kind of resulted in her getting the Divas Championship for a while. But she also had a great feud with AJ. Um, I don't know, and she didn't seem like a typical like diva at the time. Like she actually seemed tough, but not in a way like Beth Phoenix, where she wasn't like feminine. She had a great mix of being like hot and tough. I mean, I think that's really important when it comes to building stars. And Caitlyn could have been a star, but she just wasn't around long enough. She left like 6 months after the AJ feud. Um, I think they tried to turn her heel, and that was kind of a disaster. She was always better as the baby face. Um, the crowd was really behind her. I remember. Um, Not so much like there was always assholes on the like IWC forums, like talking shit about her and stuff. But like people, but like audiences like popped for her, like not just on Raw and SmackDown at like live events and stuff. So she was on her way. I don't really know what happened, but you know, definitely a good performer for her time. Kane. Now we're just talking about PG era Kane, so this is really like a mixed bag. I think Kane's got to be in B tier. Kane is in my top probably 20 wrestlers of all time, but there's some things that hold him back during this time. Before his World Heavyweight Championship run, there was like a good 2.5 years where he was just a complete jobber. Not jobber, but like he was fighting like the Great Khali. He wasn't doing anything significant. Um, his World Heavyweight Championship reign, it was all right. I mean, his feud with The Undertaker surprisingly sucked. I guess honestly, his feud with Edge after that wasn't good too. So I guess his world title reign wasn't that good. Um, when he came back with the mask, that was like a lot of wasted potential because there was the whole feud with Cena. We talked about this earlier with the Rise Above Hate shit, and then he feuded with Orton for no reason. The Team Hell No stuff was pretty cool. I mean, definitely unique and different for Kane. And then corporate Kane started during this time. So, as has been the case for his entire career, during the PG era, Kane has been saddled with bad gimmick after bad gimmick. Honestly, the fact he's not in F tier with every bullshit angle he's been in is a testament to how great of a performer Kane and the man behind Kane, Glenn Jacobs, really is. Um, because I still enjoyed him even in spite of all the awful like storylines they put him in. Um, like, does anyone remember that last feud with The Undertaker where he went around accusing the SmackDown locker room of attacking Undertaker, and then it turned out to be him the whole time? It's just like, what an insult to our intelligence. But, Kane's one of the all time greats. That can't be disputed, I don't think. Let's see, how much longer do we have to go here? We have many more wrestlers by the looks of it. I knew this was going to be long. Kelly. I like Kelly quite a bit for obvious reasons. I'm putting her in A tier. Now, there was a time period, pretty much right, like from like 2011 to right before she left, so a good year and a half, where she was really popular and over. She was basically like the John Cena of the women's division, if you want to call it a women's division. when she had the Divas title, she had some great matches with Beth Phoenix, at least for the time, because we've obviously seen a lot better since then from the women performers. But uh, she was improving. One thing I hated about her was how she like screamed during her matches. That was very obnoxious. But I mean, for the most part, I mean, yes, at the end of the day, she was eye candy, but she had personality too. Like, I mean, an example of someone who was just like eye candy but didn't really bring anything else to the table would be like Sable or Sunny. A lot of those people from the Attitude Era that was like their sole purpose. At least Kelly had like a character and talked on the mic occasionally. I still think her defending Edge's World Heavyweight Championship is like the coolest thing on the planet, and I vividly remember um like for like a week looking forward to that match. That's the thing about WWE back then. I mean, say what you will about like the PG era, but um they knew how to hype things up and build things up, and I think a big reason for that is because they had pay-per-views back then. It was before the network and then Peacock, because if you were going to shell out 50-60 dollars for a pay-per-view, it had to be worthwhile, so they really put a lot more. I really think that the product kind of died slowly but surely following the start of the WWE Network. After Bryan's win at WrestleMania 30, I mean, there was almost nothing left. I mean, when Rollins turned on the Shield, after that, honestly, it's been close to 10 years now since that happened. There's been nothing really memorable. I mean, a few things here and there, but again, this is a topic for another video. But I don't care what people say. People are probably gonna hate on me for that. Kelly's an A. I stand by that. Karma. She's a difficult one to rank because she didn't have the opportunity to really compete. I'm gonna put her in like a low C tier. She did kind of make an impact in the short period of time she was there. Those promos were pretty creepy for sure. They were hinting at some storyline with Kelly because she didn't attack her one time, I remember. She completely dissed the Bellas, which was funny. She was in the Royal Rumble. That was probably the most memorable part of her run. Eliminated Michael Cole and someone else. It might have actually been Hunico right here. Sheep would have been better probably, but it's just she didn't do much. A lot of it was for personal reasons. She ended up getting pregnant and then just released after that for whatever reason. But yeah, Kofi. Put him in C tier. Kofi's always been just okay to me. He has no mic skills at all. I mean, he's good in the ring, kind of. He had energetic performances and stuff, but I never cared. He was like the John Cena of the mid card. He was just always shoved down your throat. Like they always had to put this guy in intercontinental or US title matches, and it was fucking annoying. But he wasn't terrible. In fact, he was actually pretty decent as a wrestler. I'll never understand making him WWE champion. I hate the New Day. I hate that whole gimmick. But anyways, Layla. Layla's alright. I'll put her in C tier as well. She's definitely hot, but as a wrestler, average. I hated Lay Cool. I don't really like Michelle McCool in general. We'll get to that later. Yeah, I mean, she was always just kind of in the background. I don't know. There's really not much to say about her. Tensai. Wow, I would have forgotten that was a thing. I mean, obvious F tier. I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, like, the 12-year-old me thought that it might be interesting when they were showing the vignettes for him. But once he debuted, and I don't know why I remember these like obscure things from this era. I think a lot of times in your childhood, these are like formative memories, just stuff you see on TV. They never really leave you. I remember he debuted against Alex Riley, and seeing him, I realized that's just Albert, because I played like the SmackDown vs. Raw video game, so I knew who that was, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? I knew it was going to be a failure from that point on, and sure enough, it was. I still don't understand the rationale behind this. You had Brodus Clay running around who looked just like him. It's just weird. I don't know what to say about that. Luke Harper, um, he's a solid hand. Give him a C. He's kind of in that same category as McIntyre and Justin Gabriel, where I liked him, but they didn't really do anything with him. Again, just like we talked about with Bray Wyatt and Eric Rowan, the Wyatt family was cool initially. And what separates Luke Harper from Eric Rowan, he's first of all, he's much better in the ring. He had more of a presence, and he he had a great match with Ziggler. I remember a ladder match that was pretty cool. So yeah, I always liked Harper. They could have utilized him better. Maria Kanellis. Um, I'm obviously biased towards uh, certain women for very obvious reasons, but I would put her in B tier. I mean, um, of course she's hot, that's a given, but she actually, had a lot of personality. She was fierce and feisty, and was pretty decent on the mic. She had like a certain sass about her. I don't know. I just thought she was cool. I always loved her ring attire too. Um, she was definitely very stylish. Um, Underutilized. I mean, they could have honestly made her one of the faces of the division. I mean, if Mickey James was, why couldn't they have made Maria like a cornerstone of that division? Mark Henry, give him a B, kind of in a similar vein to, say, Kane. There was this one period of time though where like Mark Henry was like, you remember Red Singlet Mark Henry, where he was like that goofy baby face teaming with MVP? That shit sucked, but the Hall of Pain was epic. He was like a legitimate monster. Like, that had to be the most unexpected thing ever, because I wasn't watching WWE that long at that point, but people had been seeing this guy for 15 years, not getting a push ever, and then he just comes out of nowhere and wins the World Heavyweight Championship. It was a good run, and then obviously everyone remembers his fake retirement speech, and then I really stand by that he should have won the WWE Championship from Cena, even if it was brief. But then again, I guess Daniel Bryan wouldn't have been able to beat Cena at SummerSlam, so I don't know. But like, his acting was just so good. He deserved a title run just for that alone. Um, so yeah, Mark Henry was definitely legitimate. He was a great like monster heel type. Maurice, uh, it's tough to rank her. I think I'll put her in C. I mean, the majority of that is based on her looks, but also, she had like a bit of an attitude, a bit of an edge, which was cool. She was all right in the ring at the beginning, but unlike a lot of these wrestlers, she seemed to actually get worse over time, and she never really did anything memorable at all. I'm probably being generous. She might be a D actually, because I never really cared about Maurice all that much. Mason Ryan's an F. That was one of those Nexus guys. Or actually, it might be like a low D, because he showed flashes of potential. He had a couple decent matches with Randy Orton and Evan Bourne, I remember. But he was never gonna become anything because I don't even know if he speaks English. I never heard him cut a promo. I don't know. Um, Matt Hardy, by this time, he was kind of like it felt like he was already over the hill. The only memorable thing was his feud with Jeff Hardy, which I actually thought was good. A lot of people didn't like it, but for me, that was all right. Put him in a low C tier. I was never overly impressed with Matt. I don't think he's that good, to be honest. I mean, obviously, all the shit when he was younger, teaming with Jeff, all the TLC matches, that's great stuff. But on his own, never really cared. Even when he was version one, Matt Hardy, it was just like whatever. And even the feud with like Edge, it was just like to me, okay, Edge is beating a jobber or whatever. I understand the feud was personal because the whole Lita thing, but I never took Matt Hardy seriously for 1 second. Matt Striker, he wasn't wrestling anymore by the PG era. He's decent on commentary. I'll give him like a high C. Um, Sometimes he was a little over the top. The whole "I'm marking out, bro" bullshit. You should never use those like smart mark terms on WWE television. But he was very knowledgeable about wrestling, very passionate. It's unfortunate that he was taken off of commentary. I mean, he was replaced by Booker T. Come to think of it, a change was probably needed. He did kind of run out his course towards the end, so it is what it is. Melina, she had some good matches during this time. She was very talented, but I'm not like a huge fan. I'll give her a C. She got kind of lazy toward the end, I feel, but she definitely had her moments for sure. She was more remembered for her ruthless aggression era stuff, though. Michael Cole, okay, this is difficult. This is probably going to be my hottest take in this whole list. I liked heel Michael Cole. I thought he was fucking hilarious. In fact, for that alone, B tier. And that's even in spite of all of his garbage commentary as a babyface. Um, that year or two, I think it was closer to 2 years where he was a heel. It was a great part of WWE programming. I don't care what anyone says. I understand the logic is like, well, he took away from active wrestlers by continuously insulting them and making the product about him. That's why I thought it was great. He was a great heel. I mean, people didn't seem to care when like Bobby Heenan or Paul Heyman were getting heat. This is the same sort of thing. It did benefit the product because people wanted to see Cole get his comeuppance. I will say one of the dumbest things ever, and this is another one of my vivid memories from childhood, is when like Cena doused him in barbecue sauce. I mean, this is when they were shoving Cena down her throat. I don't mean to go back into a whole Cena rant. This isn't 2012 anymore. Is this Michael Tarver? Yeah, I'll give him a D for the fact. No, you know what? He's still an F. I was gonna say he had some sort of presence to him where like he seemed like intimidating and like kind of a badass, but he was just awkward on the mic. I mean, and just not good at all. He fizzled out very quickly. Michelle McCool's a D. Um, I understand a lot of you guys like her. I don't think she's that good. I really don't. I never did. I thought she was very annoying and like cool. Um, I kind of liked her as a baby face a little bit on SmackDown before she, as a heel, she was just obnoxious and I don't know. She seems sloppy in the ring to me and borderline unsafe. I don't know. I don't mean to be throwing any accusations out there. I might be completely wrong, but her moves never looked like smooth. Like someone like Eve Torres, for instance, just seemed very like comfortable in the ring where I don't know if Michelle McCool ever got there, to be quite honest. She was also part of the whole Piggy James storyline, which again, that isn't her fault. That's material being given to her, but that was really dumb, especially because Mickey James was fucking gorgeous and in perfect shape. So I don't know why WWE felt the need to like fucking bully her and shame her like that. Speaking of good old Mickey, here she is. She's another one who's more remembered for ruthless aggression era stuff than PG era. So for that, she's going in C tier, kind of similar vein as Melina, although I like her a bit more than Melina. I think obviously a big part of Mickey's gimmick was like her sex appeal, but she also did back it up in the ring. She got a lot better over time too. Um, she had a genuine like likability to her. Like everyone loved Mickey James. Um, it's not really much more to be said there. Mike Knox, he had a unique look, but he was fucking terrible. Mr. Kennedy might be the worst wrestler on this list. F tier. Is this another hot take? I don't know. Do we have to still pretend that Mr. Kennedy was good? I mean, Jesus Christ. He didn't do much in the PG era. He was pretty much on his way out because, um, from what I gather, it seemed like he was a cancer in the locker room. I could be wrong on that, but he was garbage in the ring. But more importantly than that, his gimmick was fucking awful, and he was annoying every time he spoke. That's not good heel work. That's just being an obnoxious prick. I mean, you look at a guy like Edge, that's a fucking heel who can make the crowd hate him through his devious actions, but still be cool. Mr. Kennedy, for me, it was more like go away heat. It was just like when Edge was a heel, I would want to see him get beat up by The Undertaker. With Mr. Kennedy, I didn't even want to see him. It was just like, please get the fuck off of my television. God, I can't stand that guy. Where is the Miz? Is he even on this list? Oh yeah, I see him down here. Okay. We're getting through this. We're almost at the 2 hour mark. Wow. MVP. Another wrestler who's more remembered for his ruthless aggression era than in the PG. Still, I would put him in C tier. He got a lot better in the ring. He always had the personality and the flair and arrogance about him. He was a good heel. Um, he had a really good program with The Miz, which I'll talk about that a little more later when we get to The Miz. His babyface run was surprisingly strong, except when he was teaming with Mark Henry. It was really weird timing when they released him because SmackDown had a paper thin roster. They released him and Caval, even though uh, you needed baby faces at the time. But well, speaking of which, I don't think Caval's on this list. Does anyone remember him? He's known as like Low Key and other like federations and stuff. But I would probably put Low Key in C as well if he was here because phenomenal in ring talent, but again lacked charisma. I feel like I'm saying that a lot, but that just seemed to be the case a lot of the time. Natalia, I'll put her in D. She never did anything for me. I understand she's objectively a good in ring worker, but I just never cared. And she's not attractive to me, so that is another aspect, I suppose. R-Truth. This is difficult. Put him at the top of C tier. Babyface dancing R-Truth, the what's up, that sucked. R-Truth had a good 6, 7, maybe 8 month period where he was awesome as a heel. Even that did get watered down a little bit over time. Like by the time he was in the Awesome Truth with The Miz, but still, his comedic timing was great. He's not funny otherwise, but like as a heel, he was hilarious. Um, they built him up pretty good for a while. Of course, once he lost to Cena, he lost momentum. He still was in the main event for a good 4 or 5 months after that, but it was never the same. If we're talking about his heel run alone, that's A tier type stuff. But just regular goofy dancing R-Truth, that's F tier. So C seems about a fair compromise. I don't know why Randy Orton's on this list twice. Where do I put Randy? I'll put him in A right behind Cena. Believe it or not, I think Cena has had more memorable matches and feuds and promos and stuff. Definitely promos. Orton's a really solid hand, and during the PG era, he's had his fair share of moments. He had a great feud with Christian, and it wasn't just Christian, he held his own in the ring too. Um, and I mean, and his heel run when he cashed the Money in the Bank on Daniel Bryan was actually really good. I don't think the Daniel Bryan thing would have worked as good if Randy Orton wasn't sort of the foil for him. I think um, that had to happen. It had to be Orton. Orton's very talented, great wrestler, not always motivated. Um, the legacy stuff was not great, but that was mainly just because of Cody and Ted. They weren't ready. They were fucking horrible. I mean, Cody got a little better, but with Orton, I mean, when he turned babyface after he ditched Legacy, he was like really over, immensely popular, got the biggest pop of the night. And he actually was really cool during that time, 2010, 2011. By 2012, it was getting fucking old and it was time for a heel turn. Thankfully, he did turn. So, I don't know. I think low A is a good spot for Orton. Not my favorite wrestler in the world, but um, still really cool nonetheless, you know. Definitely an integral part of my childhood, seeing RKO's out of nowhere. Where are we at? Almost at the 2 hour mark at this point. Rey Mysterio. I'm going with A tier. This was a good era for Mysterio. He was Intercontinental Champion for a long time. What else did he do? He was briefly World Heavyweight Champion again. That didn't last long. Um, he had the feud with Del Rio. That was cool. Oh, how did I forget this? The travesty of him losing the WWE Championship the same night he won it. I was so thrilled when he got his big moment, but fucking Cena again. This is what I'm talking about. These are the reasons Cena's not an S tier, despite all the good he's done. It's shit like this. But right after he lost the WWE Championship, Mysterio, when he came back like a year later, this is another thing. Mysterio was getting hurt like every second during this era. He wasn't the same. He was like when he was wearing that like shirt because he kind of developed some body fat. He and Sin Cara as a tag team, it was interesting on paper, but it didn't really pan out the way they want. They both got hurt, so they couldn't have their WrestleMania match. But Mysterio is just a phenomenal wrestler and someone you can really get behind and actually care about. He's not just a spot monkey. Just like John Morrison, everything he does is in the ring is logical and makes sense. It's not just high spots for the sake of it. And Mysterio is a big part of my childhood. Like I mentioned earlier, late 2010, early 2011s when I really started getting into wrestling. I wasn't as much of a casual fan. I was watching intently, and especially SmackDown. Like him and Edge, freaking carried the show. So I was a big Mysterio fan back in the day. Ric Flair, this is the tail end of his career. Um, the Nature Boy, I mean, he wasn't really around long enough to make an impact in this time period. I'll give him a high C. Um, I mean, the match with HBK at WrestleMania speaks for itself. That's great stuff. And I mean, I guess the career-threatening storyline was pretty cool, where every week a new wrestler tried to topple Ric Flair. It was a nice little run for him, but he was obviously deteriorating physically. It was a little sad to see. This would have been the perfect retirement for him. It's a little sad that he continued to wrestle in TNA, but um, it is what it is. Moving on, Ricardo Rodriguez. As an accessory to Del Rio, he's great, but otherwise he's just whatever. Put him in D. Ricky Ortiz is F. I think that's who that is. Ricky Steamboat is the next one. Now this is when he was a just a legend. He fought at WrestleMania against Jericho and Backlash and had some good performances. If we're talking about just this time frame, I would put the Dragon in C tier. He could still hold his own. I mean, Ricky Steamboat's one of my all-time favorite wrestlers, at least from like the new generation era. His match with Savage is like number one for me all time in matches. His match with Jericho was like it was great, and then he was also part of like a 10-man tag that was just like an all-star lineup. I forget who was in it specifically, but I know he was. So this was a nice little run for Ricky the Dragon. It was good to see him come back. RVD. Now, this is when he came back, and he was kind of a shell of his former self. It was still cool to see RVD in a WWE ring, don't get me wrong. They could have done more with him. They really underutilized him. They should have at least had him there to put talent over, but he really didn't do that. I think he put Rollins over. So, for this era specifically, RVD's going in C tier. I like RVD. I think he's a really innovative wrestler for sure. Um, but he was slowing down at this point. All right. I was just making sure Undertaker's on this list because I was going to say someone fucked up really bad if he's not on here. Roman Reigns, and this is just his Shield days. Put him in a B. Maybe like right here. I mean, right away, I thought he was cool when he first made his debut alongside the Shield. I already knew Ambrose and Rollins by that point. I was watching FCW a lot at the time. And, obviously it all worked out with Roman Reigns. At the time, I probably would have preferred Chris Hero, but back in 2012, I guess you could say I was a bit of a smart. But yeah, Roman Reigns really won me over time. His performance at Survivor Series 2013 was great, and then the Royal Rumble in 2014, he was definitely making a believer out of me. His in-ring performances improved, and he didn't say much back then, so he was just cool. This was before his babyface run, where they were obsessed with shoving him down our throat, maybe even worse than Cena. But this might be the highlight of his career, actually, as far as I'm concerned, because this whole bloodline thing. Might have to make a video about that at some point, just how overplayed this Roman Reigns bullshit is at this point. But I enjoyed him during this time period for sure. Is that Rosa Mendez? She's like a D. She basically just shook her ass. I mean, kind of just a waste of space. Ryback. Low B. I mean, he was hot there for a little while. He beat Jobbers for like 6 months straight, and then when Cena got hurt, they had literally nobody to challenge Punk, so they booked themselves in a corner, gave him a title match before he was ready. They had that weird fucking ending at Hell in a Cell where Brad Maddox low blowed him. Um, and then he just kept losing. He lost to Punk again in a triple threat. He lost to the Shield numerous times. He lost in the Royal Rumble. He lost to Cena twice. Um, after that, he was pretty much finished. He was reduced to a tag team with Curtis Axel. They had no faith in him anymore. But it wasn't even his fault. It was just WWE booking themselves into a corner. This guy had potential. I don't want to say he had talent because he wasn't really that good of a worker, but he had something special and he got the crowd behind him and I liked him for a certain period of time. He did get a little better in the ring actually toward the end. Like when those matches with Kalisto weren't bad. Um so yeah, low B tier for Ryback. Santino. Put him at the top of D tier because I think for what he did, he was really good in his role as comic relief. I mean, in retrospect, the whole thing with him being the runner-up in the Royal Rumble was um, kind of funny. I was deeply concerned. I remembered now. I was just a kid, so I bought into the hype during the Elimination Chamber for the World Heavyweight Championship. When it came down to Daniel Bryan and Santino, I'm like, is Santino going to be the world heavyweight champion? Like, it seemed so real. And I'm like, no, please, no. I'm sure most kids my age were wanting Santino to win, but I was just like, fuck no, not this guy. I didn't hate him, but I'm just like, this comedy gimmick as a main eventer, please, no. And then he won the U.S. title from Swagger a few weeks later. I was actually at that Monday Night Raw, I recall. That was unfortunate too, that he held even if it was just a mid-card title, he held that title hostage, which is why it felt like a breath of fresh air when Cesaro won it, even though he didn't really do much with it either. All right, we're getting down toward the end of this list, slowly but surely. Seth Rollins, and again, this is just his Shield days, so very early on. A tier. I'm putting him ahead of some of these. Put him right about here. I mean, when I was like, keeping up with like FCW and early NXT, I liked Rollins, but not as much as Ambrose. He was always kind of second fiddle to Ambrose to me, but by the time they had that debut match at TLC where Rollins fell through the tables, I'm like, okay, this guy is something special, and he continued to have jaw-dropping in-ring performances. He was just young and ferocious and hungry and um, really inspired as a wrestler. So he was a great component of the Shield. I mean, the Shield was just obviously on another level. We all know that. They kind of saved the product in 2013 because that was a very quiet year otherwise. I mean, there was the rise of Daniel Bryan, but other than that, the Shield was pretty much all anyone cared about in WWE. And then, of course, when it came to the heel turn, the moment itself was just like incredible. It was gut wrenching and heartbreaking because the Shield were on top of the world. They could have rode that train a little longer, but they went for the shock value. It could have worked out, but they didn't play it right. They had Rollins be a cowardly heel too much of the time. But yeah, so A tier for Rollins. Shane O'Mac wasn't really around much in this time period, so I have to give him a C. Although I do like Shane. I think he gets a little bit too much hate. I think for what he does, he's really a solid hand. HBK. These were his later years. I'm going to put him in A tier. I mean, he's the Heartbreak Kid, just a phenomenal talent. I mean, it's incredible how like I think he was better in his second run, and like he could have still wrestled for a few more years if he wanted to, but obviously, just for his matches with the Undertaker alone, he deserves that spot at A tier. two of my favorite matches ever. I know it sounds cliche to say, but it's just freaking phenomenal. And the whole DX reunion was kind of a bust, but I can get past that. He had a great feud with Jericho. Uh, I don't know if he did much else during this time. It was mainly just the match with Flair obviously was, you know, one of the all-time great WrestleMania matches. So even late into his career, these were some fruitful years for Shawn Michaels for sure. Sheamus, um, I don't know how many of you will agree, but I think Sheamus was great during this time period. So I put him in A tier. Um, it was a little premature giving him the WWE Championship in 2009, but it was also like a nice little surprise. You never saw anything like that at the time. Um, I thought he was cool right from the get go. I mean, I hated his feud with Orton though, because they booked him like a chicken shit heel, and he should have just been an ass kicker, to be honest. The King Sheamus thing was dumb, but that was short lived, thankfully. Um, and I liked his babyface run. I know a lot of people didn't, but I grew up during that time, and um I liked him more than Cena, that's for sure. He had he did have a never ending feud with Del Rio. That was kind of annoying. He got a great match out of Big Show though. He had a solid run with the World Heavyweight title. Um, I mean, yes, he was kind of like to some people probably shoved down our throats, they would say, but I don't know. I didn't mind him. I thought he was pretty cool and definitely a unique and different kind of wrestler. Had a lot of cool moves and stuff, so and a unique look. I mean, I always vibed with Sheamus. The only time I didn't like him really was when he was in the bar. I mean, Cesaro destroys everything he touches. All right, Shelton Benjamin. This was toward the end of his run. This is when he was like had bleach blonde hair. I'm gonna put him in C tier. He was still a solid hand. He had good matches, but by this point, it was evident he was never going to be a main eventer. He didn't have the promo ability or the character to really carry himself as a star like that. Sin Cara. Now I believe this is the original Sin Cara they have here. Mystico. Give him a. I don't know if B tier is too generous because he didn't really amount to anything. But you know, I was like obsessed with Raw and SmackDown in 2011, and like he was always having great matches and stuff. I understand he botched a lot, but he still had a really unique style, even different than Rey Mysterio. Um, so I mean, I, I don't know. I mean, the whole thing with the lighting was I actually thought was kind of cool. Um, it's unfortunate how his career turned out, but um, I don't know. He had some good matches for sure. I mean, I did really like the feud with him and Hunico actually. Stephanie, she wasn't really on TV that much during this time, thank God. Whenever she was, it was a train wreck. F. DiBiase's F too. I alluded to this earlier, but I wanted to talk about this more in depth. Legacy was a good concept, but Ted was just so fucking boring. I mean, nothing could save him. I mean, you tried to put Maurice with him. It didn't help that he had the worst song of all time. I come for money. Like, get the fuck out of here. Um, he was a charisma vacuum, and he wasn't even good in the ring. Just completely talentless. Primo and Epico, F. I never cared about them. You know what? Maybe that's harsh. They can go in D. They're solid in the ring. I just don't really like them. Funkadactyls are F because of the association with Brodus Clay. Kali, uh, F tier. I mean, at times he made me laugh unintentionally, but I don't think that was the goal. I don't know. I don't even need to say anything more about the Great Khali. All right, The Miz. Some of you are gonna think I'm crazy, but I'm putting The Miz in A tier, albeit very low A tier. His run with the WWE Championship was actually good. I mean, the feud with Orton was kind of lame. Um, I keep saying all these feuds with Orton are lame, and it's not even Orton's fault. It's just the booking because, you know, they wanted Orton to look invincible, so nobody could ever beat him. It was kind of the same as Cena. So there was always these disqualification endings at pay-per-views, so the feud would have to continue for another pay-per-view, and this would go on for months and months. But anyways, when it comes to The Miz, pre-2010, 2009, maybe, he was horrible. His tag team with Morrison, I mean, I always liked Morrison, but when he do you remember that storyline where Cena, like, beat him early on and he was, like, fired but came back the next week? When he came back, he had a new attire, new theme song, new swagger, new attitude. He felt more legitimate and he felt like a rising star to the point where when he won Money in the Bank, I could see it. I could see him being a future champion. And I don't think anyone predicted he would have main evented WrestleMania with Cena. Was that the best decision looking back on it? Maybe not, but good for him that he got his moment. Um, and over time, he just proved to be a really solid hand. He kept getting better and better in the ring. Um, his mic work is good. He's a good ambassador for the company. He plays the heel role perfectly. He's a great all-arounder. I know it's hard for some people to take The Miz seriously, but he definitely made a believer out of me over time. The great one, The Rock. Um, give him a low S tier. I'll put him ahead of Batista. He did more in this era than Batista, I would say. Even though Batista did have a good um, heel run in like 2009. But The Rock, I mean, pretty much all of his run was consumed by the feuds with Cena and then with Punk for a short time. The first feud with Cena was awesome. His return promo, I think it was on Valentine's Day in 2011, was just awesome. It was great to see The Rock back in the ring. Um, I would have liked for him to be around a little more, but it was understandable given his actor status and stuff. The match was actually pretty good with him and Cena too, so it lived up to the hype. I would say I was glad he won. Um, the matches with Punk really weren't that good, but I can't criticize him too much. He is the great one, and he didn't have to come back, but he did it out of a love for wrestling and to ultimately put Cena over. Um, just like Hogan had put The Rock over. So that's what wrestling's all about, is passing the torch. Even if I didn't like it, and I didn't like how they broke the whole once in a lifetime thing. But I would say his run was a success. I mean, it was very memorable, just his feud with Cena alone. So he definitely belongs in S tier. One of my all-time favorite wrestlers, period. So to see a modern version of him wrestling, I really do appreciate that. The Undertaker is S tier without a doubt. Even in this time frame when he became more of a part-timer. So we talked about it earlier. He had the great feud with Edge. This is when his WrestleMania streak was going strong. So he had the great match with Edge, 2 with HBK, 2 with Triple H. I didn't really like the one with Punk, but a lot of people did. Prior to that, he had a great match with Batista. So that's a good 7 or 8 years where he just had incredible streak matches. The streak felt more important than ever as well. And it was a defining trait of The Undertaker. His world heavyweight title reign was really fun too. It was kind of short, but like when he beat Punk and he held it until Elimination Chamber, that was some good times. He had title defenses against Batista and Mysterio and stuff, and um, that was really cool to see. Um, the WrestleMania matches speak for themselves. Um, seeing the streak broken is really sad, but Undertaker was great in the ring at this point when he took on a more like MMA approach and he got more lean and physically fit. I mean, what a transformation! And he did it pretty late into his career. So kudos to the Undertaker for that. Absolute legend. The Usos, F tier, never liked them, don't like them to this day. Tiffany, that is the ECW manager. I can't believe I know all these names. I would think there would be some people that I would have forgotten about, but this is a very memorable time to me. Yeah, Tiffany's in D tier for me. I mean, sure, she's a pretty face, but she was kind of annoying as GM. And honestly, her looks are the only thing saving her from F tier. Uh, is that Titus? Titus O'Neil? If it is, he's alright. He had some potential, but he never really panned out. D tier. Tommy Dreamer, D tier. And this was toward the end of his career in WWE at least. And I never really cared about him to begin with, but especially not during this time. Trent Beretta, he was actually alright in the ring. I'll give him a D tier. Same with Tyson Kidd. He was alright. He was better than David Hart Smith. D tier. Oh, we're almost done with this list now. Umaga. This was toward the end of his run. I'll put him in high D tier with Santino. He didn't do much during this time. He had an awful match with Punk, I remember. I don't know. Now don't get me wrong. Umaga was cool when he first came up with this gimmick and was in the feud with Cena and stuff. That was all good stuff. But after that, I really could care less. I believe this is Vance Archer, if I'm not mistaken. D tier, and he gets D instead of F for one reason only: his theme song. And I remember playing as him in SmackDown vs. Raw 2011. For some reason, he was awesome in that game, even though he was just a jobber in real life. Vicky. I'm gonna give Vicky C tier. Yes, she was a little bit annoying and frustrating to listen to at times, but she was really good at what she did. Great heel, great manager. Vince McMahon. Some of you might think this is a little bold, but Vince McMahon is getting his own tier right above S. We'll just call it GOAT. That's where he belongs. None of this would be possible without him. He's also the greatest heel of all time, in my opinion. The greatest wrestling character ever. I have nothing but respect for what Vince McMahon has done for the wrestling business as a whole. Vladimir Kozlov F. I don't even need to say why. Let's just get rid of the dead weight before I continue. Zeb Coulter's a D. I mean, he's kind of long-winded sometimes with his promos, and I just didn't really care. Swagger could have came back on his own, and it would have been just as cool. Yoshitatsu's also a D. Jobber, decent in the ring, but I never cared really. William Regal's an F. I always hated him. I don't care. His promos were never engaging. He's kind of boring as fuck in the ring, if you ask me. Zack Ryder, give him a C. For what he did in 2011, I would have put him in B, but there's a few things you have to remember here. Number one, he was an edgehead, and the edgeheads were fucking dumb. We talked about that earlier. And the other thing about him is he was a jobber for a long time, and Rosa Mendez was his manager, and he was really annoying during that period. He came out wearing pants with only one leg, and the other leg was showing. It was just really dumb. I give him credit for coming up with this show on YouTube and making a star out of himself, and he was insanely over, and he had a good little moment winning the US title from Ziggler. He was killed and buried by that program with Cena and Kane that he was in the middle of. That was unfortunate, but as it stands, with everything we've seen, Zack Ryder's a C for me. So last wrestler we're going to talk about here is Wade Barrett. Wade's A tier for me. Maybe not ahead of Ziggler, but ahead of Cena for sure. So this guy was leagues and miles ahead of everyone in Nexus, all of the other NXT rookies, and that just comes down to his intimidating presence, his just his unique aura about him. He had good promo skills. He was just a natural heel, um, a great leader of Nexus. But Cena buried him, and then the core happened, which was unfortunate. But he bounced back pretty good. In like late 2011, early 2012, it looked like he was poised for another push. He got hurt, unfortunately. He came back with the bare knuckle fighting gimmick, which could have been cool. Those vignettes looked brutal where he was beating people up, but then he was just like the same old Wade Barrett. The bad news thing was pretty entertaining. They dropped the ball with that too. I mean, at this point, I would just describe Wade Barrett as a great wrestler, not a good wrestler, a great wrestler. I'm not just talking about in ring work, but just as the overall package. A great wrestler who was let down by creative always, maybe worse than anyone on this list. Him and Ziggler, the fact they were never like world champions. I know Ziggler was kind of. He was like world heavyweight champion for a month, but those two should have been on top for a long time. They were fucking great, and shame on creative. I mean, they rallied behind Miz and Sheamus and made them stars and stuff, which, cool. I guess that all worked out for them. But Barrett and Ziggler should be in that same category, if you ask me. Anyways, that pretty much concludes the list. Let's take a look at what we got here. The majority of wrestlers seem to be in F and D, SC as well. Pretty much all that matters is whoever's in B or higher. These are the elite class of wrestlers I remember being very fond of when I grew up. This is all in order too. So other than Vinnie Mac, we got Punk here at number 1, Edge at number 2, Taker at 3, and so on. Wow, we only had 8 wrestlers in S tier. I wanted to keep it kind of special. I mean, not every wrestler is going to be S tier. To me, that just exemplifies the best of the best. So yeah, that basically includes this list. I knew this was going to be long. I didn't expect it to be 2.5 hours, but I appreciate you guys tuning in. I plan on making more tier lists in the future, not just of wrestling, but of other stuff too. Primarily music. I have some projects in mind I'm working on when it comes to that. So, yeah, let me know what you think in the comments if you enjoyed the PG era of wrestling too, because it's a fond part of my childhood. Um, even with all the like negative backlash and stuff, I still have good memories of all that. So, anyways, thank you for watching, guys, and have a good night.